The recent fourth quarter police figures for the 2024-2025 financial year indicate an increase in kidnappings and human trafficking cases, with 13 human trafficking cases recorded in the first 3 months of 2025 and more than 4,500 cases of kidnapping recorded in the same period in South Africa. Now, this is an increase of 292 kidnapping cases compared to the same period last year, and this as sentencing is expected today in the Joshlin Smith kidnapping and human trafficking trial in Saldanha Bay on the west coast. Joshlin's mother, Kelly Smith, and co-accused Steveno van Rhyn and Jacquen Appollis were found guilty of kidnapping and human trafficking of the then 6-year-old Joshlin after she disappeared from her home in Saldanha Bay last year at the age of 6. Now, the state has called for harsh sentences for the trio, including life imprisonment. But to talk to us more about the prevalence of human trafficking and kidnappings in South Africa, as we also mark the start of Child Protection Week today, we joined virtually now via telephone by Dr. Mpho Matlala, who is a senior lecturer at the Department of Police Practice at UNISA. Dr. Matlala, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina and the crew, and Jumbo Africa, Heriamwitsula Africa, Happy Africa Month to all the viewers.
And to you, Dr. Matlala. Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Matlala, looking at the police statistics as far as kidnappings are concerned, this, of course, is very worrying for many South Africans, the fact that we are seeing increases in this regard. But perhaps we can just go back and look at when this became so prevalent and what are some of the factors that feed into this?
Thank you for that, Sakina. Look, if you reverse the clock back to about 5 years ago, in 2020, in the first quarter of 2020, you had about 1,900 kidnappings reported, and move forward to the first quarter of 2024, for example, then the figure was 4,740 or so, and you have KZN, Western Cape and Gauteng, leading the pack, understandably so, because they are the economic hubs, and these are the provinces where you find the most unequal of societies, right where we are in Gauteng, for example. If you take Sandton City, the richest square mile in Africa, and compare it to Alexandra, just a stone throw away, you'll understand the type of inequality that is there now. A lot of these kidnappings and the trafficking, the most vulnerable age group is between the ages of 15 and 25, including the LGBTQI community. Like I indicated, part of the causes is vulnerable families that become vulnerable because of poverty, maybe lack of education, unemployment, and we have now broken families as well, where there is drug or substance abuse, and there is child neglect generally. If you look at a study conducted by the Institute for Security Studies, kidnappings increased by about 264% from in 2014, 2015, they were about 4,690 or so. And in 2023 to 2024, there were about 17,000, and most of them were for ransom kidnappings. But of course, there would be other forms of kidnappings as well that would include express kidnappings, where they hold a gun to your head at an ATM, to make you withdraw money or take you elsewhere to the house, for valuables. And then there are custodial battles type of kidnappings. And if you look at that case of Mpho, it's a typical case of custodial battles. And then there are political and ideological goals, and then there are business where somebody is kidnapped because they are forcing a specific tender to go a specific direction, and but then there is, for multi-rituals, and in the past we've had kidnappings, especially of young children who are virgins for sexual intercourse, of course that is abduction, not really kidnapping, but there was this belief that having intercourse with a virgin cures HIV/AIDS, and then the most alarming is kidnappings for human trafficking.
And I suppose if we look at the proliferation in these kidnapping instances, Dr. Matlala, you mentioned the ISS, and I was just looking at some of the work that they've done and some analysis that they give with regard to the primary motives behind kidnapping. Just to add on to what you said and breaking it down into the stats that they give, they say that out of 14,646 kidnapping cases from April 2023 until March 2024, 66% of those were for aggravated robbery. That included 44% for hijackings and other robberies at 22%. And then the sexual assault or rape that you just mentioned, 10%. And revenge or retaliation, 7%. And that's often linked to gang activity or personal disputes. And then ransom demands, 4%. And you look at that and you have to be concerned, I would imagine, Dr. Matlala, about some of the emerging trends that we are seeing that are pretty foreign to most of us. But when we look at children, how is this affecting them in the main?
Look, children are most vulnerable in a sense that they are young minds, and young minds are very susceptible. And part of the modus operandi that the traffickers or the kidnappers use is, they will groom the child and build trust, and then, or they will use deception, which is false promises for a better life, or coercion, or even threats. And social media, it's another point of concern. And of course, the most dangerous would have been now organized crime syndicates who are just blatantly violent. But my concern is that, we are not doing enough. Let's leave the law enforcement agencies' capabilities, because I don't think we have adequate infrastructure within the law enforcement space to combat child trafficking, and I'll come to that later. But if you look at society itself, I mentioned earlier on that we have broken families, and we have allowed ourselves as a society, or rather as basic communities, to forget who we are as we celebrate Africa Month, our Africanness. Ubuntu, what happens to it takes a village to raise a child. The communities are no longer vigilant, and they are no longer helping one another to actually protect the children in their society. I don't see ward councillors, for example, coming up with a WhatsApp group for child alert, and I don't see members of society being sensitized to say, when you see suspicious activity or a stranger talking to children, take photos. What happened to the whistle blowing? Physically taking out the whistle and blowing and mobilizing the community to say there is a dangerous activity unfolding around children. But the primary custodian of child safety really is the family unit. In the family unit, what happened to creating awareness amongst young children? The African way, telling those old folk tales about Budimu, and Olga that steals children when they play in isolated areas or they play in the dark, finding stories in folklore or folk tales and even in folk songs. There is an old African a proverb that says, "Sepalamja lidulwa lesalemetse." Pardon for those sensitive viewers, they may feel that maybe I'm cursing or it's a vulgar word. But what that proverb means is that you have got to train the child and you have got to create awareness when the child is still young and continue with that. You cannot expect to create awareness about human trafficking when a child is already grown up, is 25, 27 years old. We worry about children when they're 30 or 35, as parents, we worry about children when we cannot find them on the phone, our children. What more of a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, without be asking a question, all mammals, animals and human beings, look after their young ones. What kind of a mammal, if you are a human being, would neglect their own children? It boggles the mind. It defies logic, it defies nature.
Dr. Matlala, we are out of time, literally in 30 seconds. Are we doing enough from a law enforcement and a government perspective in this regard to make sure that we not just safeguard our children, but deal harshly with the perpetrators of these kidnappings?
Absolutely not. We have no infrastructure. We are in Industry 4.0 or the 4I Act. You have Stop App in the UK. You have NetTip in Nigeria, Cyber Tip Line in the USA. What do we have? Apps for Uber Eats to order food and booze. We don't have digital forensics. We don't have integrated databases at regional policing level, to actually help with enforcement. We could go for campaigns such as trackers against trafficking, because trackers are the ones who facilitate the movement and they see all these things. What happened to the awareness apps? Why don't we have them? Gamification, we can use it to create awareness, so we are not doing well.
Dr. Mpho Matlala, thank you so much for your insights this morning. A senior lecturer at the Department of Police Practice at UNISA, talking to us about the prevalence of child kidnapping in South Africa and also human trafficking, and the sentencing today, of course, expected in the Joshlin Smith kidnapping and human trafficking trial in Saldanha Bay on the West Coast.